Are you looking to become a better real estate investor? Then hang on, because you're about to experience another episode of the world's most popular real estate podcast, the BiggerPockets Podcast. But before we get to this week's show, I wanted to invite you to become part of our community, BiggerPockets.com, the real estate investing social network. The membership is free, and you'll instantly gain access to networking opportunities, educational content, investor tools, and more. Sign up now and get a free copy of our book, The Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Real Estate Investing, read by hundreds of thousands of budding entrepreneurs. Just click this link right here or just head to BiggerPockets.com. With that, let's get to the show.
Hey everybody, this is the BiggerPockets Podcast, Show 6.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
Hey everyone, it's Josh Dorkin with BiggerPockets.com here with Show 6. I've got my co-host with me, Mr. Brandon Turner. What's up, Brandon?
Hey, not much, Josh. I don't know if you just heard that, but that was my cat meowing in the background, saying hello as well.
I can hear something meowing. Yeah. I hope it's your cat.
That is...
Well, we got a great show, man. This is going to be an exciting episode ahead. We've got Arthur Garcia with us, who's a sharp guy. He's not only a sharp guy, but I think we're going to have some fun to come.
Yeah, Arthur's actually one of the reasons I became a BiggerPockets blogger originally, actually, because Arthur reached out to me and actually called me on the phone. We talked for a while, and he's kind of got me connected with you. And so I actually owe a lot of my BiggerPockets connection to Arthur. So I am extremely excited to have him on the show today.
I was not aware of that, so I guess I'm excited as well. Let's talk a little bit about Arthur. Arthur is a successful buy and hold investor in Southern California who invests while working a full-time job. And he's working towards, I believe he's working towards purchasing 25 to 30 homes during this down cycle. We'll get into it later. But he's really savvy. Again, he's a witty guy. And I think he's definitely going to blow some of our minds with his intelligence. So I'm super pumped. But before we get to Arthur, I just want to talk about the show in general. As you know, this is Show 6. And our 5 previous shows, we're up to 25,000 listens so far, Brandon. 25K.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Did you think our little show would become the beast that it's become?
I didn't. And honestly, I don't know if you remember this, but back in the summer, I told you, when we talked about having a podcast, I said what I would love to have is within 1 year's time, to be a top 20 business podcast. And I think our first or second week we hit that. I mean, I thought it would take a year, and so this has been incredible, already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody who's listened so far, and especially those people who have taken the time to leave us reviews on iTunes. 99 of you guys have done that. That's 99 of 25,000. So, hint, hint. But listen, thanks to everybody who has left a review. If you haven't, please jump on iTunes and leave us one. It's really helpful, helps get the show in front of a lot more people. So definitely do it. But enough of that. It's time to get to the show. And we're going to talk about what, Brandon?
We are going to talk about buying and holding with Arthur.
Buying and holding, and doing so while you're working a full-time job.
Correct, because a lot of people that come to BiggerPockets, they don't have, they're not job free. They're held down by a job, and they see a lot of investors. I talk about I don't have a. I'm going to read.
You don't have a job? Is that what you were going to say?
I was going to say that, but I
because
do.
you got one now.
I know I can't say that anymore.
I think you do. Are you still working for? Did you just quit, Brandon?
I just quit. All right, let me re-say that.
No, I think we should run with that.
Okay, we can run with that. No, it's gonna sound stupid.
Where should we take it from?
You just said, "Isn't that right, Brandon?"
Isn't that right, Brandon? Isn't that right, Brandon? Isn't that right, Brandon?
Keep going. Yeah, that's true, Josh, because a lot of people come to BiggerPockets and they have jobs, and they see a lot of the investors on there who are job free, and they say, oh, it'd be nice to have that. But I don't think the people that are investing with a job, I don't think they get enough attention. And so I'm really excited today to talk to somebody who's got a full-time job and is a full-time investor. I mean, that's not easy to do, to manage both. So I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Cool, man. Well, let's get to it.
Sure.
Hey, Arthur, what's going on, man?
Hey, Josh and Brandon. Good to be on, man. Thanks for having me on.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you.
Yes. Hey, man. So, really quickly, I just want to let everybody know I'm super pumped about this. First of all, because when I needed a hand on the 2012 BiggerPockets conference, Arthur Garcia basically raised his hand and said, "Yes, let me help you out. I'll do whatever I can to make sure this thing's successful." And he did. He was amazing. He was our event coordinator and really did an amazing job. So, Arthur, I just want to thank you live on the air here for all to hear. And anyway, with that in mind, you're a real estate investor who is doing your thing while working a full-time job, and I think that's something that appeals to a lot of people. So why don't you tell us, I guess, how you got started, why you got into real estate, what made you decide to start getting into the field?
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess I'm probably your typical BiggerPockets guy, the one who has the day job working for the man. And at night, and when I have free time on the weekends, I'm looking at ugly houses when I have a chance. So yeah, that's a little bit about what I do. It's more buy and hold and keep my day job until I can maybe figure out a transition plan down the road or something else.
So we won't tell your bosses that are listening to the show that you're eventually planning to quit your job.
Arthur, that's not my name. That's not the name I gave. Yeah, no, I mean it's really interesting because working in corporate America, I learned this when I got right out of college. You're only as good as well as you perform, right? So I've always had that fear in the back of my mind that one day I'm just not going to be able to perform, and if something happened to me or if I got sick, I just didn't like being on that payroll situation where you don't have another backup plan. So in college, I was kind of fortunate. I went to a private school where a lot of the folks that I was peers with came from pretty wealthy backgrounds. Of course, me, I showed up with my sandals and, taped shoes and all that. But no, everybody around me was pretty well to do. And it was great because those 4 years really taught me a lot about people coming from different backgrounds. You start to see similar patterns. And one of the things that all these guys had in common, or a lot of them did, was they owned multiple properties. One of my roommates that I can think of now, great guy, but his family owned, I think, like 20 different properties. And, just talking to him over the years, I got to learn a little bit about the way that he viewed money, the way that he viewed wealth. And the only way to really get any type of wealth other than just, you can't save your way to making a decent amount of money in your retirement. You really have to find a vehicle that's going to work well for you. And real estate, of all the different investment vehicles, seemed to be the most lucrative. It made the most sense in terms of taxes. You can get someone to finance 75 to 70% of your deal. I don't know anybody that if I was going to open up a bakery, nobody's going to give me 75% of the capital to start that. On top of that, you get all these great tax breaks, and your tenants are paying down your debt with cheap dollars. So it just kind of seemed to make the most sense. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was something that stuck in the back of my mind. And then when I got out of college, I had always tucked away a little bit of money. But out here in California, right when I graduated, the market was just ridiculous. From 2002 all the way to 2006, it was just, I think it was nuts everywhere. But specifically in Southern California, the market was crazy. I mean, people were paying ridiculous amounts of money for houses that they couldn't afford. I couldn't really get in the game, so I had just kind of put my money into a 401k and a couple of mutual funds. And nothing against those, they're definitely for certain types of people, but I was slowly watching my wealth not accumulate. And then it just happened that at that time, the market had crashed around 2007 or 2008. The bubble popped out here and everything just went, houses that in certain markets out here were selling for 400,000 were selling for like under 100 grand. I mean, it just went ridiculously the other way. And it just kind of, that opportunity meets preparation. I was waiting to get in. I just didn't know what to do. And that's when we decided to jump in.
Nice.
And yeah, so that's, when I say we, I'm talking about me and my wife.
Gotcha. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was in SoCal in the early 2000s, and the big story that really jumped out at me was when I heard about a friend who was an agent who knew this cop who had just paid like, you know, $1.2 million for a house. And I'm like, you're a cop. Wait a second. How are you affording a $1.2 million house? It shouldn't happen. And, you know, with these crazy loans and all the nonsense, I mean, that to me was that sign that, man, this is just chaotic. And seeing these house values just, you know, double and then some out in SoCal was bananas. It was definitely bananas. So anyway, so you and your wife, all right, you guys are stoked. The timing's perfect. You say, hey, let's do it. We're going to go buy this long-term portfolio. What happened?
I wish I could tell you that I had all this strategic planning. It just, first off, I couldn't buy a property because it was just too expensive. Like, not fancy. I wasn't like timing it. It was just, I couldn't buy a house because I just couldn't qualify for the types of loans I needed to get. So when the market corrected, we were like, now it's the time to start investing, you know? So I put this huge down payment on a primary residence because, of course, that's an investment, right? You know? So we dropped, a substantial amount of money to get into a primary home, and we had a little bit left over. And I thought, well, you know, maybe we can use this to buy our next investment. And it just so happened we were like at a family get together, and a family friend of ours who had owned a piece of rental property out in the Inland Empire, which is, you know, about an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles. He had mortgaged himself all the way to the hill. It was at the peak. This little 700 square foot home was worth about $400,000 in this really kind of rough part of town. He refinanced the whole thing. You know, he bought all these different types of toys, not Tonka trucks, but like he
jet
bought
skis and all the fun.
Yeah, he built a motorhome and all these different types of boats and just different things. And I don't know where the money went, but it wasn't there. So once he realized that same property was not, you know, it was negatively cash flowing for a few years, he was just done with it. And anyway, him and I had started talking at this get together, and I had mentioned that I, you know, was interested in getting into real estate. And he just gave me this whole laundry list of how it was just a, you know, terrible thing. Rental property was no good, and tenants destroy your property, and blah, blah, blah. But I had, you know, up until that point, I had years of always reading different books on stuff. And I had remember all the other things that I've read that was like counter to what he was telling me. But anyway, the long story short is that he said, well, I'm probably going to short sell that house. No clue what that meant, but I was like, hey, well, maybe I can buy it, whatever the short thing is. So we had worked with a realtor who was going to double in the deal. So she was going to represent him as the distressed seller. So she went to the bank on his behalf and negotiated a reduced sale. Like, he obviously had a crazy mortgage on the home, and in today's market, or at that time, it was only worth $70,000 or $75,000, according to what what the comps and everything were pulling. So I walked in, and I was the backup person. So she went up to the bank and said, okay, look, we need to short sell this for $70,000 or $75,000. Here's our buyer, which was, you know, enter me. I got the property for about $75,000, and I was freaking nervous, man. You know, because, you know, you read all these things online, and you read books, and you go to seminars, and everyone always talking about cash flow. But I was like sweating bullets because, you know, up until this point, I had it was all theory, right? I didn't know anybody who had actually been doing it except for like my roommate's dad in college. So, you know, I'm sitting there and I have to write the escrow check for like 20 grand, and I'm like sweating, thinking, oh my gosh, is this going to work? And, you know, we signed all the documents, and then I was starting to get nervous, but I knew at the very least, after I had the compound account, everything, the mortgage, taxes, and insurance was going to be a little bit under $500 a month. And based on the research, which was a whopping analysis of just looking on Craigslist.
That's the best way.
Yeah, this is the beginning stages of my little investment portfolio. But I went on Craigslist, and I knew that I could rent it for at least $10.50 to $11.50, depending on who I could get. But I was all kinds of nervous, and we ended up closing on the house. And I got really lucky because the guy who was owner of the home before me had just was crazy on this home. He put hardwood floor in. He had recessed lighting. And again, I told you, this is like a 700 square feet home. Like, you need one light in that house. That's it. It's so small. Like, you can be in the living room and the kitchen at the same time. It's great.
Nice.
But he put granite countertops, brand new cabinets. I mean, this thing was like cherry, pristine condition. But I had seen all these like flip these house shows, so I was like, well, the front yard looks like crap. I gotta bet. So I put seed down and installed all the sprinkler system and put a fence. Anyway, I probably went a little bit nuts on the rehab part because it was already turnkey. But we ended up getting a renter in there. Long story short, and they rented it for I think $1,100. And I got to tell you, once I got that first check and I deposited into the bank account, and of course, you can do it at the ATM now, but, I walked in with my crisp, nice $1,000 or $1,100 check, and I handed it to the teller, and she just looked at it like, okay, no big deal. But for me, for me, I was like, you don't realize you're talking to the next Donald Trump, man. This is, this is a guy on this way up. But putting that first check in there was, absolutely what started the addiction. I really got hooked after that. I thought, wow, I can't believe someone's paying me to live in something that I own. And that was where the whole thing fueled my passion for real estate. And then I could keep talking, but
no, that was a long story long, by the way, not long story short.
All right. Hey, you asked, man.
No, that's a great story, Arthur. That's awesome. I can totally resonate with that. That's one of the best feelings in the world, is being able to drop off that check. So that's cool. You mentioned your mortgage. You had a mortgage of around, your payment was around $500 a month, and you're renting it for, $1,100 some. But I'm curious if you could talk about that mortgage, like getting that first mortgage. What can you tell us about that? How did you get that? Did you just go into a bank, or what did you do to finance your first deal?
Yeah, so my first deal, quote unquote, was my big investment, my home. No,
yeah.
This is the second house that we were going to get. But really, and most people know this on BiggerPockets, but this is kind of a good point. Getting loans 1 through 4 is actually not that hard. Typically, for a single family home, you're only going to have to put about 20% down. Maybe 25 once you get closer to that 4 loans. So the first 4 were actually pretty easy. You could go to like any big bank and most of them will lend all the way up to 4. I didn't have to start getting creative with my financing until I got past that hump. And then once you get to 10, it's really more creative. But what I did for the second property was we just used the same broker we had used the first time. And it wasn't too crazy.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Second loan, so.
No, I think that's great. I think people often think that you have to be crazy and you have to be creative, but I think people forget that sometimes you can just go to a bank, drop down 20-25% and get a loan. Like, there are banks that still lend today.
Yeah, it's interesting because you go to all these real estate clubs and everybody's trying to figure out how to get the owner to carry back the paper or to take on the existing mortgage, the subject to stuff, which I think there's definitely a place for that. But if you have a day job like I do and you're working full time and you don't know how to do all the ins and outs and you just want to get started, just getting a regular loans, at least for the first few properties, aren't that difficult.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a really important point there. And we talked about this in the Ultimate Beginner's Guide that we just came out with, which you can get at biggerpockets.com/UBG. But we talk about how when you have a job, like, there's so much power there to be able to get a mortgage. I think a lot of times people with jobs think, oh, I wish I was like that investor who doesn't have a job. But, when you have a full-time job, there's so much more potential for getting loans and building wealth quickly because you don't have to rely on being creative necessarily. You can just rely on the power of your job to get you there, and I think that's huge. So props to you.
Yeah, well, and the other component for somebody who's just getting started or who hasn't maximized their 10 loans yet is hard money loans expensive. Like we're just closing on a property this week where I'm paying about 12% on that, which is nice, right? Yeah, there we go. Yeah. 12% interest on that. But anyway, when you're first starting out, you're getting locked, especially now, locked fixed rate debt for 30 years at, 5%, give or take. So, you really do have an advantage over somebody who, can't get those types of loans. So I think if you're just starting, maybe you don't have that 20% to start with. Well, partnering with somebody is a great way to maybe either lend your credit score for a percentage of the upside, or, work on doing a 50-50 split if you guys, figure out some creative way to do that. But those are the types of deals we're doing now because we can't get that good financing anymore. So anyway, I just kind of a side note to what you were saying there, Brandon.
No, that's great.
All right, Arthur. Well, listen, man. I mean, so your focus thus far, in my understanding, is that you're a buy and hold guy, right? You're not in there flipping houses. You're building a large portfolio, and your goal is to build long-term wealth via cash flow through that portfolio. Correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much what our plan is.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Now, why did you decide on that? Was there a specific reason? Obviously, you're working a full-time job, so flipping might be a challenge potentially, and some of these other strategies are more of a challenge while you're working, or was there a specific strategy towards why just the buy and hold?
Right. Well, I mean, at first it was like I was telling you that last story where it was just, hey, someone's going to pay me, at the time I thought cash flow was really that $500 that was going to make from what I paid in my mortgage to what I got from the rent.
Oh, you forgot the expenses part.
Yeah. Once you start saying like, hey, I got to get a new water heater. Oh, geez, there goes a whole month. But, over time you start to see how those actually all add up. But the idea behind it was, okay, how do I create something that's going to create another stream of income without me having to be involved every day? I didn't want to be actively working in the business, which is kind of funny because it actually ends up taking a good amount of time still. But that was the idea behind it. But I like the compound aspects of rental property. Like I was saying before, you got the mortgage pay down, which you're getting through amortization. You get a hedge against inflation. So your down payment has a way to just continue multiplying a lot faster than other vehicles. But there's something more that I thought was really interesting, and maybe I can take this time to talk about it.
Sure.
The market in Southern California, and again, this is probably just specific to California, but as I, bought that second home, I was like, this is great. We're seem to be in a real opportune time. I started really to take the time to get educated. I went to a bunch of local seminars, real estate clubs in the area. And more importantly, I found like three or four really, really solid investors that were willing to, I don't want to say mentor me, but they gave me time. So I called them and I would ask them questions. And as long as I didn't take too long to ask them questions, they were pretty helpful. And what we started to see here is that in the markets like the Inland Empire or like the Central Valley, some of these outer regions, like maybe 2 hours outside of Los Angeles, the prices actually slingshot the other way, right? So you had that home for $400,000. It should have never been priced at that point, but it slingshot the other way to $70,000, which it should have never gone that low because the cost to rebuild in that same market was around $200,000 to $220,000. So the thinking behind it, what these other investors who were really, really smart were doing, and this is no credit to me, this is all them, is they were saying, well, look, if you can buy below the cost to rebuild and you're going to get that $70,000 property, and that new construction for that same house in that same area would be around $200,000. If you can cash flow it, hold on to it for however long it takes for that thing to get up to 130, 140, at that point, you can decide how you want to exit. If you want to refinance and grow your portfolio further, or take half of your portfolio, pay down the other half, or do a 1031, which is when you sell your property and exchange it for something with a little bit more cash flow, maybe more units. So that's what all these guys were doing. So my mindset actually changed after I bought that second home. It was, instead of trying to be, okay, I'm going to own this house for 30 years, it was more like, well, we're going to use the cash flow to pay for the expenses and to hold on to this property and try to get as many of these single family homes as we can in this downturn, because California is cyclical. And as we can acquire as many as we can, if we could get to like 30 properties or 20 to 30 properties and let them appreciate $50,000 or, in equity, we could cash out at that mark and maybe be, $2 million or $1.5 million in equity at that point. And then we could, like I was saying, we could either pay off half of the portfolio and live off the cash flow or take back some paper. Anyway, it was at that point we actually said, okay, wait a minute. This is not just a hobby that we want to do on the side. We can actually make a legitimate business out of it. So from there, we, not only just cashing a rent check from that one house we had, we said, you know what? We need to do everything we can to really take advantage of this downturn in the market. So from there, I talked to my wife and she was like, when Arthur gets his little ideas and sits me down, he's about to throw a curveball. And I said, all right, look, here's what I think we should do. And she's like, what is it? I said, we need to sell our home. You know, the big investment that I was telling you about, that first one I bought. And she was like, really? Do you think so? I said, we have money tied up in this home. If we get rid of it, we live in an apartment for a few years, we can probably pick up, 3 or 4 more houses just from this one sale. And she was kind of hesitant, but she's like, look, you seem to know what you're talking about, so let's give it a shot. So after we owned the home for about a year, we put it right back up on the market. Our neighbors thought we were crazy. Our family members were like, you're completely out of your mind. What are you doing? You just bought this home. And, our real estate agent was really happy. He was the only one that was excited about it. We sold the house. We actually got a little bit more than what we paid for it, which, it wasn't intentional, but hey, I'll count that as a successful flip. And then we went gangbusters. We were looking for every opportunity we could to buy as many of these. And it was a certain type of home. We weren't going to pay anything more than $50,000 to $80,000 in our market. And we were planning on, we're going to just hold on to these properties until we could get to a point where we felt they appreciated enough to liquidate them. So it was really hard because there's a lot of properties in that price range at that time, but they weren't in good neighborhoods. So we had to really be very specific, and we couldn't finance them as quickly as we wanted to because, my wife was working part-time, so I was the only one that could qualify for all the mortgages. So after you get your credit rung about 20 times, it gets more difficult and you have to find different lenders to work with. But that's how we went. We went gangbusters and tried to buy as many as we could. And that's, pretty much what happened after that.
So, it's interesting because, as an investor, you don't want to be a speculator, right? But you said something that actually should resound to a lot of people. It certainly did to me, which is the market was underpriced. And you knew the market was underpriced because the cost to rebuild was far higher than the current value of the property. So you knew that if you were to acquire these properties at that value, that at some point they'd hopefully appreciate. Now, I'm just curious because in this case it worked for you. But why don't we look at a place like Detroit, for example, where you can buy a house for a model car, and you'll $5,000 and you got a house. Certainly, it costs more than $5,000 to rebuild. What was different, and what convinced you that this was? What made that any safer than potentially buying a property in a super depressed area like that?
Yeah, no, those are some really good points. And that's why I was trying to say that, what I was doing or what I'm doing is really based on what has happened historically here in California. But in addition to that, let's say my complete forecast is off track and I miss it by a long shot. And to get that $50,000 in appreciation, it takes 20 years instead of the next 3 or 4. I would be completely okay with that because the way we're structuring the deals is that even if I can't get to that level within the next relative short future, each of these properties are cash flowing. We have solid financing behind all of our units, and I'm not doing this for a day job, so I'm not living off of that rental income. It's just a secondary thing that we're doing on the side, after hours. And one of my mentors, he's actually a BP member. I don't know if I can call him a mentor, but Steve Landis is a guy that I look up to a lot out here in Southern California. And him and his partner met with me a few months ago, and they kind of pushed it on me and said, look, at some point you have to draw a line in the sand and make a bet where you think the market's going to go. And as long as you have your deal structured correctly, you got equity, you're cash flowing, you're always going to be in a very, I don't know what's the word, offensive position in your properties. So that's how we try to strike all of our deals. Even when we do partnerships, we always try to make sure we're buying the right kinds of property. And because I'm not, trying to do, 50 houses a year, it's completely scalable, at least in the amount that I need.
Yeah. Well, and I think as long as you're being smart about it and acquiring these properties that do cash flow, you already talked earlier about, having that, expenses are more than mortgage and taxes and insurance. There's more to it. So obviously factoring in all the expenses into your equation, if you've got a cash flow at the end of the day, appreciations is just, it's something additional, right? I mean, it's a bonus. And so, it clearly sounds like that's kind of the path that you're taking. So,
yeah, and to go with that point too, I mean, appreciation is like, I look at that as the icing on the cake, but what we have here, at least in this market in Southern California, I think that we're going to start to see the prices revert back to the cost of building, and it's already happening. Let me give you an example. We just purchased a home, I think about 3 months ago, that we got for $59,000, and the home that's across the street, the exact same one, because the last 4 or 5 months in our market have just been ridiculous. Cash investors flooding in, hedge funds, people are waiving their appraisal contingencies, have completely buoyed the properties. Now that same home was selling, I think, for $85,000, and that's just in a matter of like 3 months. And I'm not saying it's going to continue to grow at that pace, but it's definitely going to start to get closer and closer of that cost to rebuild. So, I mean, it is appreciation, but I'd like to think that we're locking it in, due to the construction costs. We're just trying to factor that part into our equation as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Earlier you talked about how the first 4 deals were pretty easy to finance. After 4, did your strategy change at all in financing? I mean, it must have. You couldn't just walk into a bank, can you? Or is that still what you do?
No, not anymore. But one of the things we started to learn, right, is after that we got the 3rd deal and the 4th deal. Well, as we start to get deal number 3, deal number 4, deal number 5, deal number 6, as we started getting higher, I started to learn the difference between a broker and a direct lender, and that was kind of an eye-opening experience, because when we were working with the broker, the underwriting guidelines while we were in escrow, I can't tell you how many deals I almost lost. I was so upset because we'd have like a smoking deal with like a lot of equity, and it was in a good neighborhood, and then our lender couldn't follow up because they were, outsourcing all the underwriting. And I was, standing there trying to close to get this deal, and I knew if we couldn't close in 30 days, we were going to lose it. So what that caused me to do is to go back and, this is one of the things I do now with anybody who wants to work with me, like a mentor type thing, or I always tell them to put a list together of all the lenders in their market and to just go down the list and try to learn as much as you can about the financing aspect of the deal, so you can understand the underwriting guidelines right from the beginning, because there's all these overlays that each of the lenders require, and some of them are a lot more lax and some of them are more detailed. So knowing what those perimeters are before you get to that point is super helpful. Anyway, so going back to me, that's exactly what I did after about our 4th mortgage. I was like, okay, who are the people we can build a relationship with? And I found a couple of lenders that were not only willing to just lend me money after that 4th or 5th property, but they were willing to help me move my financing around, to kind of give me coaching to say, okay, here's how you need to move your money here. Here's how you can finance this deal, so that I could get to those 10 loans as quickly as possible. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for finding those lenders?
Yeah, actually, I think my super creative way of finding out the lenders in my market was I literally typed in like Inland Empire, direct lenders, mortgage brokers, and then the list on Google. And whatever popped up, I put like in an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm not kidding you. I probably called about 40 different loan officers. And I talked to everybody from hard money guys to, guys who are just, working at a community bank. All these different aspects, because you don't know where those not rat holes. you don't know where those rabbit holes. There could be rats in there, but you don't know how far they're going to go. And I'll give you a good example. One of the folks that I spoke with had it was this community bank, and he gave me the address, and he said, I think we can work with you. And I said, okay, well, I'll go out and meet you. And he said, I think we can't give you a mortgage, but we can give you a home equity line of credit. Okay, great. So I drive out to go meet him, and then I drive up to this Walmart, and I'm like, Walmart? I gotta have the address. No, the address is right. So I walk in, and of course you got the whole colorful landscape that Walmart offers. People with ponytails and rat tails, little children running around with no shoes.
Yeah.
And so I go there, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. But right in the middle of the Walmart, there was this little community bank. And I walked in, I talked to the branch manager, and I bring in I was wearing, it was funny because I walked into Walmart wearing like a suit, and because I wanted to be like professional, and then everyone in Walmart, no one was wearing shoes, it was kind of but I go in there, and if you get sued by Walmart,
I was going to say, if Walmart decides to be an advertiser, we'll just.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just be like blank at that point.
I do not condone Arthur's activities nor his commentary about Walmart. We certainly appreciate Walmart as a centerpiece of the community, and clearly, when you walk into Walmart, there is a shoes-only policy. So be sure to show up at Walmart with shoes. Thank you.
You can show up with shoes. You don't have to have teeth, though. But anyway. Anyway, so I walked in and I talked to the branch manager. We start talking. I spent about a good hour and a half with him. And he tells me that he can extend out 4 different lines of credit to one person. So I thought, well, there's 4 extra loans for me right there. And then he goes, but this is another thing about working with us. Once you build a relationship, I'm going to introduce you to Dale. So he brings Dale over. Dale's the portfolio manager. So he actually does these rare things that you hear about. It's like the chupacabra, like you hear about portfolio loans, but it's hard to find them. And this guy comes out and he does portfolio loans. So this one bank literally opened up 14 different opportunities for me to continue making purchases.
Nice.
So
That's
anyway,
awesome.
So that's how I did it, Brandon. I just set up a list and then not being afraid to just call everybody. And a lot of them say the same things, but every once in a while you're going to find somebody who has lax overlays or is willing to kind of say, here's how you could do it if you still want to do this,
Yeah,
And they may be in a Walmart.
They may be in a Walmart.
May not have teeth, but they're there. No.
No, that's really, really good advice. I mean, I think people oftentimes, they'll call one lender or 2 lenders and that's it. They're like, oh, they're all the same. But I've always found that, some lenders are really, really good, even though they have the same rules. I mean, most banks have the same rules and the same guidelines. But the actual banker that you work with or the lender you work with oftentimes can find creative ways, and not even like not illegal, not immoral. I mean, just creative ways to make things happen. And we have this portfolio loan or whatever. So I think that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you another little tip here. Something you wouldn't find necessarily in a forum post. One person from I wrote an article for BP a couple of weeks ago about how to do this, and one of the guys called me and he was like, "Look, there's no way to do this. Once you get 10 loans, it's impossible." And I said, "Well, who's buying the properties?" And he said, "Well, it's me and my wife." And I said, "Okay, does she have a W-2 job?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Are the loans in both of your names?" "Yes." I said, "Well, why don't you go back to the same loan person that you're working with and have each of you qualify for the loans? Because just because both of you are on title, it doesn't mean that you have to both take out the debt. So one couple can literally get 20 Fannie Mae loans if they're buying the right types of property. Because if you're cash flow positive and you're working with the right lender, they can use that cash flow to basically count the extra debt you're incurring. So literally, if you find one bank and they're willing to work with you, you can do 20 loans and 8 home equity lines of credit. So that's 28 loans. That'll definitely get you to where you're wanting to go, at least.
Yeah, that's
great
awesome.
advice. Yeah, definitely. Cool, man. Well, let's get back to the job thing. You've got you've got a job, and you work during the week. How do you actually, particularly Arthur, how do you invest while you're working? How do you manage tenant calls? How do you manage finding deals? When are you working? When are you doing your real estate?
Yeah. So having the job, working for the man.
Does he have teeth?
Yeah, he does have teeth. He has teeth, and he has a checkbook too, which is why I like him. The thing is that the first year we got started, we had all these units that we were just starting to acquire, and when you have like 2 properties or 3 properties or 4, you could still manage it doing both, but once we started getting people starting to pay late, and tenants who had their mom was sick, or you had to go and try to evict them, my market's 2 hours from where I live. And that was mostly just because those are the only places where the numbers make sense in Southern California. Sure. So for me to go out there and post a 3-day notice or to try to evict someone, it's just, I'm wasting a lot of gas. I'm wasting a lot of time. And I remember going to my tenant one day. It's this lady nice lady, but speaks, really broken English, and she's salt of the earth, but she's taking care of her sick mother. So I go there and knock on the door. She opens the door and her mom is just like sitting there in the living room. She's got no shirt on and she's like kind of sedated and she's like 90 years old. And like, I don't know if she didn't know that I was like, that her mom was exposed. And I just said, you know what, after seeing that, which no one should ever have to see, it's just, there's a reason. We should not do this. After that happened, I pretty much figured out we have to find a way to scale this. And for me, it was reading a couple of posts by Michael Zuber, he's an awesome contributor to the BP blog, and he's somebody that I would like to call my mentor, even though I don't necessarily talk to him on the weekly basis or anything, but he's provided a lot of guidance. And one of the things he had told me early on was that property management for him, because he's in a similar industry as I am, it's just the cost of doing business. So that was really the biggest change for me after that first year, was moving over to property management. They don't manage the properties as good as I used to. I'll be the first to admit it, and they don't take care of it as well as you would. But it's the opportunity cost that I'm giving up by not managing the situation myself. So I just look at it as sunk costs. When I find a deal, I just have to find a deal with that much more meat on the bone because I got another mouth to pay for. So that's how we do it. So that's one component, property management. The other component is we have a really good contractor in our market who, when he overcharges me on a few things, I kind of let him know, hey, you're overcharging me, but I want you to know that I'm going to let this one go, because I want them to understand that there's a value here. There's relationships that we're trying to build. And I'll give you an example with that same guy. We were buying a house about 2 weeks ago, and he looked at 2 properties for me, came back, called me in about half hour after he walked through those properties and said, this one's going to cost $12,000. It's in a better neighborhood, but this one that's going to cost you, $5,000 to rehab. It's in a worse neighborhood, but you can get in cheaper. So I would go with that one. And, not having to drive out there, not having to do a detailed inspection on the whole thing. He's worked with me on all the properties we own, and he does all the maintenance on my stuff. So it just, you need to find ways to build systems. And that's pretty much what we spent the last 3.5 years doing, is building systems while working with local realtors and making connections so that we start to really know our market and have people doing a lot of the work for us. So we're just more managing things. And one more side tip is we work with contractors that only work with us on email. They'll take phone calls and stuff too, but there's a lot of these handyman guys that just don't do email. And just at a sure simplicity for my life, it's just easier to have somebody who works with me in email. And that was kind of one of the big changes, because a lot of times they'll just give you a quote over the phone or they'll text you, and it's just, that helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's a really good tip. I think the finding somebody who will work the way you work is really, really important, and you've demonstrated that. Can you talk a little bit about property management and this contractor? As far as management, it's definitely true. It's hard to find somebody who's going to manage a property as well as you would if they're not going to put the love behind it, so to speak. But how did you find your property manager? And do you have any tips for other folks who are looking for somebody, because you put a lot of trust in these guys? So what would your advice be?
Yeah, I guess the thing for me is I'm still looking for that that great property manager. So maybe someone can call me. No, we me and another investor friend of mine who were buying in the same market. I took a list of 10 people. He took a list of 10 people, and we just kept calling different folks, figured out what their placement fees were, how much they hold, to manage the property on the monthly basis. Do they charge for, sending somebody out to the property? Because a lot of times they'll send a handyman out there and they'll mark it up 20% and they get to keep that spread. So there's all these different things that we did. We called all these different folks, and there was one guy in town that was kind of at the time he was a smaller operation. Now he's kind of blown up. But between my investor buddy and myself, we kind of leveraged him and said, look, if you'll work with us, if you'll waive your placement fee and if you'll lower your monthly rate down, will you consider working with us? And the idea of getting all these properties at once just made him salivate. So he was completely on board. So now we pay, I think, $70 a home to have him manage it. So it's not a percentage on our rent. It's just, that's what he charges. He doesn't charge a placement fee. And as far as the contractors go, he lets us use our own people, and they let, he'll actually pay it. So they'll bill the management company directly. But I'll be honest with you, there's no great way, because he's not the only guy I use. I used about 3 different ones, and I'm still trying to find new people who will, because it's a tough business, because you get somebody who you really like, and then they end up doing something different because it's typically that it's usually run out of some office where they're an assistant. They're not really a property manager. So you really have to try to, find someone that you're going to be okay with and comfortable with, and then just go with the expectation of knowing you still have to be actively managing your property. Even if that means like, all right, did we place a tenant? Okay. Every time I go in my market, I still drive through all the homes that we have, and just to see, okay, well, this one needs, the fence is falling down. We need to, trim that tree back. So I'm still really involved. The thing I don't want to have to do is I don't want to be driving there seeing someone's mom naked on the living room couch. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's really what it is. And honestly, some are better than others, but it's just a matter of interviewing them and kind of rolling the dice to some extent.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some really, really bad luck with property managers, and the biggest piece of advice that I've got is, you keep an eye on your property manager. You definitely want to watch what they're doing. Like you said, I mean, you might have a property manager. You go by the property and the fence is falling down. Where the hell were the property? Where were they? What were they doing? That is their job, but they're not gonna catch all that. The attention to detail. I've never heard somebody say, "Hey, I've got the greatest property manager ever." You'll never hear that coming out of the mouth of a real estate investor. And it's really messed up. I mean, that's something that people should be priding themselves upon. But just keep an eye out for these guys, and watch what they're doing. And I think if you're doing that, then you can be a little more comfortable, because, like you said, you don't want to walk in and put the 3-day notices and deal with the naked grandmas and all that stuff.
It's the only thing people are going to remember from this podcast.
Yeah.
People with no teeth and some naked ladies.
This is BiggerPockets Podcast, Show 6 with Arthur Garcia, BiggerPockets.com/Show 6. This is the Naked Grandma episode of the podcast.
There you go.
Tune in.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, we're starting to get towards the end of this show. So can we talk a little bit about what a good deal looks like for you, and your method of analyzing those deals?
Okay, no long stories. I'll try to give some meat here so that. So when I first started, for me, it was a 20% cash on cash return. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was happy with. And that is, for people who maybe don't know what that is, that's when you get a percentage of your money back on the yearly basis. That's about 20% of what you put into the property to get the home. So, I don't know, I can't think of quick math, but it's when you get about 20% back from what you put down.
Invest $100,000, get $20,000 back.
There we go. Okay,
is that quick?
Yeah.
Is that fast?
There we go. I was like, yeah.
Look at Mr. Math over there.
Hi, I'm Mr. Math.
So that was how we first started, and then as I got better, I had to get better at buying property, because, like I said, when you first start off, getting a 30-year fixed mortgage at 4%, it's going to be pretty easy to get 20% on your money. It should be anyway, if you're buying the right kind of house. Once you have to put 30% down, or now sometimes I have to put all cash to get homes, you got to really find other ways to do it. So the new matrix I have is I'll carry a property for 10% cash on cash if I can get 90% or 80% of my capital back out within the first 6 to 14 months of ownership of that property. So I may carry a property and cash flow, maybe a few $100s a month, and then in 6 months refinance it via a HELOC. And now my, initial capital is mostly pulled back out of it, and I maybe have $10,000 in the deal, and I'm still bringing in, $500 a month or something like that, or $400 a month. And now I have my working capital to go back and, deploy to do another deal.
Now, how do you be careful? How do you make sure that you're not spreading yourself too thin?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a lot of it comes from planning, and I think the biggest thing is cash reserves. One of the things that a lot of people talk to me about, sometimes they'll email me, and I want to get into real estate and all this stuff. And I said, well, if you want to do buy and hold, you need a little bit of cash. I'm not going to be the guy here telling you can buy with no money down. There's ways to do that, but you're going to be making almost no cash flow on those types of deals, or there's a reason the guy's giving you the property for no money down. You know what I mean? So I'm a big advocate of, you got to have ample cash reserves. Maybe doesn't all have to necessarily be sitting in your bank. You might want to have a home equity line of credit that's not fully tapped out, that's got money sitting in there, or you just have to be prepared for the worst. And like I said, every property we get, if I can't refinance out of it, I'm okay with that. Like if I have to sit on this profit for 5 years or 10 years, only making this amount of money, I'm okay with that because there's typically something I can do to the property to manipulate the value down the road, or I have a strong equity position in it. Like, maybe I can enclose that patio and make that a third bedroom, or, add an extra bath or enclose the garage. So there's usually a couple of ways to get out of it, but you do have to be careful because if you start to scale a little too fast, you can get paint yourself in a corner.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. I think one thing you said there that's really, really important for people to know is about having multiple exit strategies. You said you would be happy if one thing happened, you'd be happy if another thing happened. And I think that's key right there is you can't have one way out of a situation. And that's the downside of using a hard money lender. A lot of people jump into hard money and they say, well, I got a year, or I got 6 months to sell this, so no worries. And that doesn't always work out that way. I know that's happened to me, and I know it happens to a lot of investors. Sometimes the property doesn't sell, or sometimes you can't get the refi that you want, and you got to have that exit strategy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You gotta know exactly what you're looking for, and make sure that there's each property you get, like there's another way to add value, or you're buying under market, or you can do something to manipulate the price. So yeah, that's a great point.
Nice. All right, man. Well, listen, as we come to a close here, we always have a set of questions we like to ask, and I guess we'll start with what's your favorite real estate book, Arthur?
Okay, I came prepared for this one.
He's been listening to the show and has notes.
Yes. So I'm going to say something like The E-Myth. No, I'm just kidding. It's like everybody said that one.
I just bought that. I now have it.
Welcome.
I actually was previewing it on the Kindle myself the other day, so that's pretty fun.
There's this really good book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, guys. You should check that one out too.
I've never heard of that.
No, that's actually a good book. But the one I would say for someone who's wanting to invest in as a buy and hold person and keep their day job, it's by William T. Nickerson. How I turned 1,000 to 3 million while holding a full time, or in my spare time. I think it's something like that. I'll send you the link on it, but yeah, it's how I invested 1,000 and it became.
Yeah, I just read that a couple weeks ago. It was really good, and I actually just sent it in the mail over to another BiggerPockets member because that book's expensive, and it's been out of commission for a long time, but it's a really, really good book.
Yeah, that's a great one. So I really like that book.
Nice. All right, well, then I don't have to ask the next question. What's the next question, Arthur?
My favorite business book?
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Hey, see, I may not be sharp on my numbers, but I know what questions are.
10%.
Exactly. To add value to the viewers, the listeners here, I thought I'd bring one in that no one's brought up yet. My friend Nicole actually mentioned this one to me. It's by Mark Cuban. It's How to Win at the Sport of Business, and I've just been reading that book, and it's kind of a motivational. I really like Mark Cuban. I think he's like pretty sharp on stuff.
Yeah, big fan.
But it's actually a series of blog posts from his blog, and he just kind of put them in one book. BiggerPockets should do something like that.
Kind of like the ultimate beginner's guide.
BiggerPockets.com/UBG.
Yeah, but that book is solid. Both of them, by the way. The one by Mark Cuban and by Brandon Turner. Both are really good.
And Josh.
Well, yeah, of course, Josh. Yeah.
I take umbrage at the fact that I get no credit on a book that I was, a part and parcel to. So,
okay, by Joshua Dorkin and Brandon Turner, another good, right up there with.
There you go. There we go. All right, yes, and speaking of Mark Cuban, we would love to have you on the show, Mark, if you're listening. By the way,
there we go.
Yes, go Mavericks.
All right, man. So. You're a SoCal guy. You got any hobbies? Are you surfer or what? What do you do for fun?
Long walks on the beach at night in the twilight. Yep, that's always a popular one out here. I just got into working out now. I'm a big CrossFit guy, so I do that on my spare time. Yeah.
So you could do CrossFit while Brandon's doing his P90X. You guys can do it over Skype or something.
That's insanity. P90X was so last year. All right, last question for you, Arthur.
Me and Brandon will watch each other work out.
Yeah, all right, last question, Arthur. I ask this to everyone because I love this question. What do you believe sets apart the top performers, the ones that are successful, and those who come and go quickly?
Oh, there we go. You ready for it?
I'm ready.
The art. This is a Joshua Dorkin term here. The art of the side hustle. I think.
So yeah.
I think that's the big differentiator, because you know what? It's like anything. Real estate's like any other business, any other thing in life. The people who get the best results are the ones who put the time in. So whether that's going to a few seminars or taking the time to call a couple of investors, it's good stuff. So I would just say to people who go that extra mile, knock on strange doors to try to get information that you need to make your business more sound. So yeah.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. Well, listen, everybody, you can find Arthur on BiggerPockets. We'll have his link to his profile in the show notes. Again, for those of you who are paying attention to those show notes, it's biggerpockets.com/show6. Otherwise, where else are you? You on Facebook? You on Twitter? G+? Are you? Where else can people connect with you?
I have a blog, thebuyandholdguys.com.
That's right, you do. Thebuyandholdguys.com. It's a great blog, by the way.
Yeah, you can go there, or you can find me on BiggerPockets. So either one.
Yeah, cool. Listen, this was great. Lots of fun, and really appreciate having you on the show. I think people are definitely going to learn a lot from what you had to say. So thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. It was great having this conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you, Arthur.
You guys take care.
All right, everybody, and that was our show with real estate investor Arthur Garcia. As we've said a couple times before, this has been show number 6, and you can check out all the links and additional information on the show notes at biggerpockets.com/show6. It's kind of hard to keep focus as Brandon is making faces at me through the other side of Skype, but I'm going to keep going. Before we go, we just want to say thanks to all the great reviews again on iTunes. And if you haven't left one, please do so in your iTunes player. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/biggerpockets. This is Josh Dorkin signing off. The views expressed in this podcast by our guests do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of BiggerPockets Incorporated. Please do not take offense if you are a 90-year-old naked woman, shoeless, or missing teeth. You're still welcome on BiggerPockets.com.
You're listening to BiggerPockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.